In this video I'm going to show you how to make a two-coloured pom-pom for this hat. So I've got the main body, it's this nutmeg colour, and then I've got this green and this sort of natural colour that I'm going to echo in my pom-pom. By the way, this hat is my design. You can find the pattern link in the captions. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some scissors, some card. I've actually just got, this isn't very thick card, it probably is better to use slightly thicker card. I've just found a scrap of card and I've folded it in half to save myself some time because I need 2 bits of card in this pom-pom template. I've got a bit of glue, which you may or may not need, and some sellotape. Again, this is optional depending on how you're going to make your pom-pom. So if you don't have any glue, what you can do is first of all cut out this template, which is in the pattern, and then you can draw around it onto your card and cut out 2 pieces identical. What I'm going to do is actually stick this, there's very little Pritt stick left in here, I'm actually going to stick this template onto my card and then cut. So it's obviously just similar to using it as a stencil. It will make my card a little bit thicker because my card is a bit thin. This Pritt stick's on its last legs really. So I'm going to stick that on my card. And then I've got 2 layers here. You can do one at a time if you prefer, if you've got thicker card. And I'm just going to cut round my template. So this template is 12 centimetres in diameter. If you want a different size pom-pom, you can obviously, I think you can find plenty of these on the internet, these kind of templates. And I'm just making sure I'm keeping these together. This little slit is quite important for, I'm actually going to cut on the inside of the black line for this because otherwise that little slit is too small. And then cut round here like that. Bit of paper on the back of the card. So here I've got my 2 bits. So what would happen now normally is that you would get your, when I use 2 colours, I don't do one strand at the same time. I get, because I want an even distribution, I'm going to get both colours and wrap them round at the same time. So the principle is you keep wrapping round until you get a nice fat, going all the way around till you get a nice fat wodge, and then you get your scissors and you slip them in here and you cut it and then you tie a string round. I find I'm a bit cack-handed and I always mess that bit up. So what I like to do, and this is completely optional, and some people find this more of a faff than it's actually worth, but for me, I find this really helps me, is I'm going to get another piece of yarn that is going to fit inside of here, and I'm going to put this bit inside ready to go. I find that if I try and put this in after I've cut the yarn, it all just falls apart. So I've got a piece here that is going to go on the inside like this, and I'm literally just going to get a tiny bit of sellotape and sort of stick each end down. This is just my way of doing it. I'm not saying this is the way to do it. This is how I do it because I really struggle with this element and have lost loads of, you know, just ruined loads of pom-poms trying to do it, doing that after. So that goes in there, and it just means that when you actually come to cut the strands, you can actually start tightening this even before, you know, just get that ready. So I'm just going to tuck that in there because I can hook that out with a crochet hook or something later on. I'm going to pop that in, and now I'm going to start my wrapping. And this is why I've got this slit here, because if you don't have a slit, you can only pass through however much wool will fit through this hole. Whereas I just want to work with whatever I've got, whether it's a full skein, partial ball, scraps, whatever. So I'm going to do 2 colours at a time, because I want an even distribution. And because obviously the pom-pom's going to be cut along this edge, I tend to start the tail end at the top. So I'm just going to keep winding around. So I tend to just try and do, because I'm filming, I'm not actually doing a very good job. I'm going to start off just doing 1 layer all around, and sort of imagine it. I try to imagine it in sections. So obviously this line here is sort of a quarter. If you think that's a half, that's a quarter. And then sort of fill that in, come along to the next quarter. Again, this is just my way of doing it, however you like. And this does use quite a lot of yarn, and that's why I make this after I've made the hat, because this is my leftover yarn for my hat. So these were Jamieson's double knit wool, 50 grams. And this is what's left. Okay, next, let's inch our way over to the next quarter. These are kind of 8ths really that I'm wrapping up. And the next 8th, but you can see why this slit is quite handy, because if you've got just a hole in the middle, like I remember making them at school, and you know, there was just a tiny hole in the middle of what they gave you, and it was really annoying. So again, I'm actually going to switch to my left hand now. You don't have to make it absolutely perfect. You're just trying to get it as even as possible all the way round. So I do kind of make these sort of cake-shaped wedges, these sort of triangular wedges, and then fill them in. I find that's the best way to kind of keep it even. And then I would do this much more even if I wasn't filming. Oop. Okay, and then I'm going to just try and get as close as I can to this edge, but not too close, this other end here, this open end. So I think that's about as close as I'll go to there. So tuck that little end back in. So that's basically one sort of, probably slightly more than one thickness. And what I'm going to do is now I'm going to just work back the other way. And I'm going to keep doing that backwards and forwards until I've put enough in there. So that is a matter of opinion really. If you want a super dense, chunky, fluffy pom-pom, then you will just keep going until you literally can't fit any more yarn in. I don't even know if I'm going to have enough yarn for that, and also I might even get bored before that point. So I'm just probably going to do maybe 4 passes, so 1 back round, 2 back round, 3, I don't know, we'll have to see how much yarn I've got left. I have already made a pom-pom out of, I did make another prototype hat, and there was enough yarn left over from the 50 gram balls to make a pom-pom, so it should be okay. So I'm going to just keep going as much as I can, and I'll meet you back. I'm switching hands again now. I'll meet you back when I think I'm done. So I'm actually making the final pass around this template now. As you can see, I don't have very much of this one left. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my fingers to feel where there's some areas that are not as fat. So that has got quite a lot of yarn there, but here still feels a bit thin. And you've got to just be careful not to pull off that. You can see there I accidentally pulled it off the start. So that's a bit thin there. I think I've got a couple more wraps. It's a bit thin there. It doesn't matter too much. Once you've got a certain number of wraps, they do tend to kind of naturally distribute, and you can see here it's starting to bend a bit, and this is why you do need, this is probably about the thinnest card you can get away with, really. Let me have a feel. A bit more here, I think. And coming to the end of this cream colour. And then just go back a couple more. I mean, you could fill this up as much as you wanted, and it would just make a very dense pom-pom. But what you have left from the 50 grams of your Jameson skein or whatever you're using, actually I'm going to, after this I'll calculate how much of this cream yarn I had, and I'll put it in the I'll put a little caption up after I film so that you get a bit of an idea of how much yarn was used. Okay, well that's it. I've finished the yarn now. I'm going to just snip that off. So now's the bit, the fun bit, or the bit where it can all go horribly wrong depending on how you see it. I'm going to find my ends here and just peel off that little bit of sellotape. I'm actually going to just already, so make sure you're not using a yarn that breaks easily as well, because that is another thing that might cause you a bit of a problem. And actually, if you're, I'm just going to tie a very, very loose knot there, just so that I don't get this end here confused with these ends once I've cut it. And actually a better idea would have been to use this colour that I'm using for the hat as the middle strand. That would have been a better idea, because then it can very easily see, once you start cutting these and they all start popping out, you can see which one was the one that's, I don't know what you'd call that, the kind of stabilizing, tying everything together. So now what you do is you get your scissors and you slot them between the templates, and you just start cutting. So you do kind of want to try and hold everything in place. You see what I mean? If you were actually now trying to get that central bit on there after, you could have a few problems. So I'm just going to keep cutting round. I might even flip it over and do the other side. I might start just actually keeping it flat is quite a good idea, because that stops everything sort of popping out. So I'll lose these last few bits. Bit tricky here because this is where the cardboard was, I probably wrapped a bit too tight and the cardboard wasn't sturdy enough. It should be fine. It's quite a thick bit here as well. Keeping it flat on the table should stop me losing anything. Okay, now we've got our middle bit here, which I'm gonna pull tight. You can remove your template. You might be able to use it again if you want to. And now I have kind of secured those now because I've pulled this middle bit a bit tighter. And now I'm going to pull that middle bit tight, and being aware that I don't want to snap this yarn because this is wool, does have quite a low breaking point. So now it's just a case of kind of fluffing everything up. That's the bit I tied it with. I'm not actually, there's a bit that didn't quite make it. You will, the beginning and ends where you right at the start of your wraps, you very often lose a bit. So actually I'm quite pleased with this, how this has turned out. I'm actually going to cut that bit off because when I come to sew it on, sometimes you can use the tail end you tied it all up with, you can use that to sew it onto your hat. But I'm actually going to sew straight through the middle of the pom-pom when I'm sewing on my hat. So just going to give it a little bit of a shake and a little bit of a fluff up, and then you can just start trimming off any of these bits that are too long. But in general, this is actually already not too bad. This is obviously, this template makes quite a large pom-pom. These scissors are not very sharp. It is best to use nice sharp scissors. So I'm just going to keep turning that round and kind of trying to fluff up any sort of ends that look like they're sort of folded in. It's not too bad. There are still a few sticky outy bits, but you can see how where I've used both yarns at the same time during the wraparound, it's also a good idea to come back to it, because what happens is you know, even after you've sewn it on, you can still come back and give it a bit of a trim if it needs. And it's better to do small amounts of trimming, because obviously if you cut off a huge chunk, you can't go back. So a little bit at a time. Quite a crazy pom-pom actually, isn't it? I'm gonna have to get the hoover out and suck up all these bits of wool. Anyway, you get the idea. I'm going to keep gently trimming this until I'm happy with the shape and the overall density. And I'll show you how I'm going to attach it to the hat. So I'm now going to sew this pom-pom onto my hat. I'm going to use the same colour. If you had some tails left over from joining all the strands of the pom-pom, you can attach it with that, but I actually prefer getting a bit more stability so that the pom-pom doesn't flop around. I want it sat on there quite solid. So I'm actually going to use double thickness of yarn with a wool needle, and to start with I'm actually going to attach, I'm going to secure the yarn onto the inside of the hat. That's the very first thing I'm going to do. Just make sure that's even. So to do that, I'm literally just going to find the middle, and then I'm just kind of going to do like a couple of cross stitches. Just to form a sort of firm base. Go across there. This does seem a bit messy, but I find this provides a really good base to attach everything to. That's the tail end there. And then I'm just going to pop up through the middle of the hat, and it doesn't really matter that you can see these, because once that is on there you are not going to see anything. So now we are going to just sort of roughly guess where the middle of the hat is, middle of the pom-pom is, and we're going to go up through the middle, and then down again through what feels like the middle. And I'm just kind of directing the pin now until I can feel it on my finger. I've got my index finger on the middle of the hat, and I'm just going to pull that through until it's tight. And then you might just need to, actually for this, a little crochet hook is quite good, because you can kind of pop up any of these that have sort of been squished down. You can also use your fingers. You just got to be careful not to pull them all the way out, obviously, because you might end up with a bit of a bald patch in your pom-pom. So that's where you can see here, this is, I've just pulled the thread that I was attaching the pom-pom to. I'm just going to get some of these strands out of the way, just to give that a chance to pull through. Pull that through, fluff everything up nicely. So that could be enough. If you feel it needs extra security, you can do that whole procedure again. So don't cut off the yarn. You can just go down, back up through the base of the hat, come up through the middle of your pom-pom, and back down again. This is a really good way of doing it if you don't like having a floppy pom-pom. I'm actually going to use my finger on the, make sure I'm going up into the middle. So I've got my index finger on the inside of the hat, just as a kind of feeler. Okay, so then I just need to sort out where I've again caught a few bits. Just gently tease those out. fluff everything up, and then this is ready to fasten off. The reason I do it this way instead of just using the tails that you attach these strands of the pom-pom together with is because I find it just goes a bit floppy, flops around on top of the hat, and I prefer the pom-pom to be, if you like a floppy pom-pom, that's fine. I like it to be quite firm on there. So I'll just talk through what I did there. So I've started to make a stitch. This is to fasten off. So I've started to make a stitch just in the back here, and I've made a loop, so I've not pulled it all the way tight, and then I'm passing the needle through that loop. I'm going to pull this until that loop tightens, and then this second loop I'm going to go through that loop as well, and that kind of makes like a double knot. This is all secure now, so I'm just going to cut off these ends, and it doesn't really matter how much of the ends you leave because that's inside the hat and no one is going to see it. So it just needs a little bit of fluffing up, and then there we have it, ready to be worn.